is Mackenzie. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you so much for being here. Today we are doing another, what do I call this series? Adaptation versus book. So we're going to be talking about The Witcher Season 1 TV show versus the books that it was adapting. So specifically we are talking about the two short story collections that started the Witcher series. These are technically not part of this series in the sense that these are not continuous stories. These are full of different short stories, and they make up the backstory of the characters that we come to know and follow in the actual series. So the first book being The Last Wish, and the second book being Sword of Destiny. So I guess I'll just add these up here so you guys can keep an eye on them. I also don't like holding books the whole time in my video. I have weak arms. So first, I thought I would talk about the difference in story structure that each of these books have. So even though both of them are short story collections, they're told in very different ways. There are 6 short stories in The Last Wish. Each of them are interspersed. It is not a continuous short story, and then we move on to the next one. We tell a bit of the first short story, then we tell the whole second short story. Then we touch back with the first short story, then we go to the third short story. Then we go back to the fourth short story, and then we touch base on the first short story. It's it is entirely confusing, and it took me a very long time to figure out what was happening. And I kind of do this thing when books start to get a little bit too confusing for me in the way that they're set up, the timeline, the structure, and all of that. I'll just let my mind glaze over and just wait for it to make sense. Inevitably, it always does end up making sense, and then I just feel like I've seen, it's one of those Disney pictures where it's all those tiny Mickey Mouses, and then if you let your eyes glaze over, you see the big picture and it's like Goofy or something. That's what it's like. Whereas in Sword of Destiny, it is much more of a traditional short story collection where they tell the first one and it has an end, and the second one and it has an end, and the third one and it has an end. The series itself is very interesting because there's a lot of political intrigue that's happening. There's a lot of people who are, making moves, mages and kings, and power is shifting hands. But Geralt seems to not care for any of it. So you're following Geralt, the main character, and he just does not care. And so when someone's trying to explain something to him, he will sometimes just cut them off and be like, I don't care. We're moving on. We have a monster to fight, or there's a person that needs to be saved. And he just doesn't care about the politics of the world almost at all. He is monologued at so often. Most of these books and scenes, I forget Geralt is even there. It was a very fun, interesting way to tell the story because I did feel like by the end of the book I had a pretty good understanding of what was happening in the world. These short story collections are a bit confusing because they are kind of out of order, and there are there's some of them are out of order. The time skips, they don't tell you how long it's been. A lot of the characters don't age. Geralt doesn't age because of his because of the mutations that Witchers go through. And then Yennefer also doesn't age, nor do any of the other mages, because they use magic to keep themselves looking young. So it's very hard sometimes to figure out what's happening. You really have to rely on the political stance of the world, which can also be difficult when Geralt doesn't care for the political stance of the world. So you're kind of in a catch-22, but it's very fun, engaging. The characters are funny. I think listening to the audiobooks are very funny because sometimes they pronounce things. The Jaskier character that we know from television, his name in the translation is Dandelion. They call him Dandelion, and nothing makes me giggle incessantly more than Dandelion. So I truly enjoyed the book. I truly enjoyed both of the books. I really enjoyed the setup. I felt like the characters were very real, so much so that the end of the second short story collection ends with my heart broken. And I couldn't get over it, and it took me a very long time to start the actual series because the characters hurt me, okay? Now, the first season of The Witcher, I really enjoyed it. I thought that they did a very good job. I liked, aside from Nilfgaard's armor, I thought that the costuming was really nice. I thought that sometimes the wigs didn't look, you know, too good, but there weren't too many wigs where it was like almost offensive. I enjoyed the music, but who didn't? I really enjoyed the storyline. There were very few and slight differences, but I was almost okay and happy with those differences because it made the world seem more fleshed out. And the shifting in perspective from Geralt to the other characters really lets the audience care about the politics of the world and gain more of a worldly sense of what's happening, whereas Geralt just harumphs around and doesn't care. But man, is he gorgeous. So I'd like to talk about the differences in the book versus the show, so that way we can kind of all be on the same page. Like I said, there were slight differences. Not too many of them were offensive to me. I feel like there was only one scene that was very upsetting to me, and only because it ties that scene into the overall story that will be told in the actual series of books, as opposed to just letting it be a character development scene, which is what it was in the books. So from episode to episode in season 1, each of them are basically following one of the short stories in either one of these books. They don't do all of them, but they do a majority of them. I guess let's start with the one scene that I am not necessarily happy with, and then we can talk about all of the other ones that I really enjoyed. So that way we can end on more of a positive note. So the one scene that I really wasn't happy with is the scene where Geralt gets his nickname, the Butcher of Blaviken. In that scene, in that story, in that episode where he is, basically him and this girl are doing this like thief dance around each other. They finally connect to each other. In the book, their connection is more so about them both truly not being monsters, truly being born human, and the world around them viewing them as monsters and using them as scapegoats and as a reason to abuse those people and get rid of their status, their power. The woman that Geralt ends up fighting in that is a princess, and it is all about her not being able to have her status because of someone else's power over her. And it mirrors Geralt's struggle in his life as well, where someone always tends to have power over him, be it by money or having someone like threatening to hurt someone that Geralt cares about. So it was really sweet to see them to come together, and it's tragic when you see them fight in the book and he ends up killing her, because they were truly the same soul in that sense, where they understood each other's plight and they understood each other's hurt and their place in the world, and they just wanted better for themselves. And by her coming out to fight and him needing to be and standing up for, I guess, just normal people, and just Geralt always seems to have the morals of a man in the 21st century as opposed to a man in medieval times. And like, it really gives him this sense of like honor, and more so that normal citizens, even if they're shitty people, don't deserve to be killed and butchered on the streets. And so he goes out to protect them from these other people who would have. And he ends up killing her, and in the book it's just that. It's just tragedy. It's just him and her, and she's sad and he's sad, and that's it. In the show, she has this prophetic vision or prophecy, it's like something, and she talks about Ciri and how his destiny is connected to her. And by that point in the book, Geralt doesn't know Ciri, hasn't been to the ball where he claims her as child surprise, or where he claims the law of surprise and finds out that it'll be a child. He has no idea, has never even seen Yennefer yet. That's how early in the story, in his history, Blaviken happens. And she just totally prophesizes for no reason. This woman is just supposed to be a woman, a human, a princess who was taken from power, and that's it. And all of a sudden she has a prophecy during her death connecting Geralt and Ciri. And like, I understand why in an overall TV show that only has about 8 episodes are you going to connect every single episode to the overall plot? I understand why you would do something like that. However, I don't feel like it was so important to connect it. I feel like it would have stood just fine on its own should it just be what it was, which is a character development moment for Geralt. Because in this moment where he is saving the citizens of Blaviken and from these people who would have butchered them, he in turn is called the Butcher of Blaviken. He in turn is chased out of there, things thrown at him, and people don't care for him and blame him for what's happened, not realizing that he is the one who saved him. And in that moment, in the tragedy of this, where he loses this woman who really understood him, loved him, he is also realizing that no one else in the world is ever going to understand or love him the same. And he probably just killed the one person who would have known. Now we as the audience know there is Yennefer, and she is there for him, but it still stands to be something where the tragedy of the character development there is taken away from the fact that all of a sudden there is a prophecy about Ciri. I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was lame. Boo. Thumbs down for me. Some of the other things that ended up happening that weren't in the book were Yennefer's backstory. We got no mention of Yennefer's backstory. All of a sudden, Geralt sees Yennefer, knows Yennefer. They meet in the same kind of way where she is basically controlling that whole like mansion of people, so that way like they're like having an orgy, and then Geralt comes to find her, and all of that still happens. But Yennefer's backstory, she never divulges to Geralt. It's only the audience who knows it in the show. And in the book, because we're following strictly Geralt's point of view, we never get Yennefer's backstory. We get mentions of after Yennefer uses an intense amount of magic or an immense amount of magic, you can see that her back starts to hump, Geralt mentions. Her eyes start to stop losing their glow. One of them becomes droopy. Her smile becomes crooked, stuff like that. So you do get that. But I felt like it was so beautiful to have this backstory, how tragic it is to show that her callousness as a full mage and an adult comes from a place where she is needed to protect herself, to be strong, to force the world and life to give her just a portion. And she is at a point for sure when we see her finally and is as a full mage where she doesn't just want a portion, she wants the best portion, and she wants all the power in the world. So I think it was necessary in this kind of setting in a show where you do need to have like some sort of love for these characters, especially because Yennefer and Geralt have this on again, off again relationship where they just butt heads all the time, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not, and sometimes they're together and sometimes they're not. We can also say that Ciri is much more powerful all of a sudden in the show than she is in the book. In the book, she only displays small blips of magic, enough that Geralt knows that something's off. She knows more than she should, but she really doesn't get powerful until the actual beginning of the series, and I would say that would be book 2 in Time of Contempt. When she is taken by the Black Knight in the Fall of Sintra, which ends up happening in like the first episode, but in the books it doesn't happen until much later, not until book 2 in Sword of Destiny. So in the Fall of Sintra, when the Black Knight takes Ciri and she screams to get away from him and like the world cracks and the obelisk breaks and all of that stuff, yeah, that doesn't happen in the book. Yeah, she screams and it's very powerful and it like hurts his ears and it's definitely a magical scream, but yeah, the world doesn't break, there's no rift, there's no shift, there's nothing. She just gets away. That's it. I don't know how much that was needed for the show, I guess in the sense that they're trying to make this more of an action-packed situation, and then there was a lot of, I heard a lot of complaints about Ciri's portions of the show where she was in Brooklyn, the Forest of Brooklyn, and with the elves, and everything that was happening with her was a little bit boring. So how do we fix that? With the possibility that Ciri might just scream and the world will break in half. I mean, I guess. We also talked about how Jaskier in the show is not Jaskier in the book, he's Dandelion. Or in the audiobook, he's Dandelion. Triss also starts existing way too soon. She's in season 1, where in the books, she doesn't even come into place until Time of Contempt, which is the second book. She's mentioned for sure, but she doesn't come into play like at all in the books. Not until there's like a definitive moment where she tries to like hit on Geralt. But that happens in season 2, you know? Also, the battle at Sodden Hill, the very final climax of season 1, that doesn't happen in the books. That's not how the short story series ends. I can tell you how the short series ends, but it's very interesting that this show is starting to... While Geralt, the character, doesn't care at all for the political intrigue or moves of the world, the show is so intensely focused on the politics, magical moves, and power moves that's the climax of the whole show is the battle at Sodden Hill. And that is not in the books at all. It's mentioned for sure, and people talk about it afterwards, but since Geralt wasn't there, it's not in the book. The way the short story series ends, which is actually... big heartbreak for me. It's much more of a character-driven book than I guess the show is, because the last story in Sword of Destiny is about Geralt and Yennefer, and they're together, and Yennefer brings Geralt to, you remember her ex-boyfriend, the guy that she was with while she was at the Magical Academy, and then they like separated, and then like she like basically met Geralt. Okay. So she brings Geralt to that guy's architect place, the archaeological dig. She brings him there where people are mean to him. He has to take like shitty jobs for crap pay, and like people are awful to him. And she goes basically to bang her ex-boyfriend. And it's so awful. And then she like dips. Okay, that's not how it happens. So she bangs her ex-boyfriend, and Geralt's like, you seriously brought me here so you could bang your ex? And she's like, yeah, but you don't have to stay. And he's like, what the heck? I love you. Come on. And she was like, well, I'm going to do whatever I want. And so basically her ex and Geralt go to have a duel, right? And then Yennefer sends them both a letter basically stating, I'm done with you guys. I'm not coming back. You know, suck it. I'm leaving. And her ex-boyfriend is like, Geralt, kill me. And he's like, no, you can kill yourself because I'm going to go find Yen and I'm going to make her love me again. So bye. And like, for Yennefer to do that to Geralt, like, it just broke my heart. And then Geralt's like, well, I love her, so I'm going. And I'm just like, no, you deserve better. And I think now that I'm talking about all of the aspects of the short story, I think it's definitely that moment where the same with the woman in Blaviken. Yennefer knows Geralt and loves him and cares for him anyway. And yeah, she makes mistakes, and yeah, she's not the best, but she understands him. And I think that that is what Geralt is looking for in a partner. And, you know, that's the love he's looking for. And now I'm getting so emotional over it. You guys... Also, we can touch on the details of Sodden Hill in my next video. Today we're doing season 1, and in a couple days I'll put out my video for season 2, and we'll talk more about what happened in Sodden Hill and the details of that in that video. But it's really interesting to see how the show is shifted a lot, not really shifted a lot from itself, but shifted from the book enough to be much more of a world-building driven book rather than a character-driven book. Much more plot-driven in the show, and I think that has a lot to do with the success of Game of Thrones. Yes, it is a little bit about characters, but after about season 1, the characters stop really being developed, and we just go from there. What would they already do? We're not developing them any further. We're just seeing, okay, what would Littlefinger do, and what would Tyrion do, and now we're just doing things. And it's much more plot driven in the things that are happening more so than these characters developing or changing, growing, or anything like that. So I wouldn't say that in this season it was necessarily a bad thing. I have opinions about season 2, but we'll get there. So season 1's books, short stories 1 and 2, I thought they were great. I thought they were amazing. I loved them. I thank you for joining me for my little TED Talk here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next one. Okay, bye!